Hey
Go.
y'all, this is Ashley White with the PBS Pinchback Gun Club in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we are tuned in with Costly Conversations.
What is going on? And welcome to Costly Conversations. I'm super excited because we have Ashley White with us today. We're talking about a few things, including cash bail and her work with the Bail Project. Also, we're going to be talking about her work as a law student and a little bit about her amateur boxing career. So hang on tight because there's a few other things that we want to talk about. If you want to support the show, there's merch you can buy down below. And of course, the best way to support is to join us on Patreon for $5 a month, all the way up to however much you want to contribute. You can make shows like this possible because guess what? It's free, but there's a lot of cost involved with it. So thank you so much for your support. And now back to the show. What is going on, Ashley? How are you doing?
What's up? What's up? I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation to come on the show.
I'm glad we can make it work.
Yeah, yeah. You know how these things go. It's always like, hey, let's do a show. And it's like 6 months later, we're finally doing it.
6 months later.
Pretty
Yep.
much. Pretty much. But yeah, so what people may or may not know about you is you're actually part of or the president of the gun club down in Baton Rouge. What's the name of that one more time?
So I am the president of the Baton Rouge chapter of the National African American Gun Association here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And we go by the PBS Pinchback Gun Club. And that is in honor of the second black governor of any United State and New Orleans native and Union Army soldier, PBS Pinchback. And we honor him through our gun club and his contribution to the state.
That's awesome. It's really cool to kind of look and see a lot of the historical, I guess, the roots of a lot of the names of different gun clubs across the state. Some of them are kind of generic, and some of them are common. When I say generic, as in we understand the history, we've seen it before. But personally, maybe someone will judge me for this. I'd not heard of PBS Pinchback, so I think it's awesome that there's some cool history behind the name and that we can honor people who do cool things and great things and kind of contribute to things moving forward in a positive direction. Um,
Right. Yeah. The interesting thing about both PBS Pinchback and Oscar Dunn, who was the first black governor of any United States, was that they served during the Reconstruction era. And that was a time in which blacks had the opportunity to create their own governments, elect their own representatives, and govern themselves as the majority in the state. And so, although Reconstruction was ultimately snuffed out after the Civil War, unfortunately, I think it is an important time in which we can see that there was a lot of political and economic power for blacks in the South.
yeah, that's I think that's important to remember because I think with a lot of how people view uh, African American people now, it's like, oh, we're looking at the poverty, we're looking at what movie and media shows us, we're looking at kind of the worst of the worst situations when it was like, oh, I just watched a video of this Waffle House fight, and unfortunately, the majority of the people involved in that brawl, more or less, were black people, and I think generally it's just bad for the brand. It just makes us look bad, even though everybody's entitled to a dust up. Anybody can get into a fight,
Mm-hmm.
but
Everybody
it
can
just
get it.
it just continues to push this idea that we don't have anything going for us, even though we look back and we see the Reconstruction era and a lot of the greatness that occurred at that time. So I think it's important to know where we came from and understand that we can continue to build in a positive direction. It doesn't have to kind of be the same old that we've been seeing in recent days of what we've been seeing, not necessarily what exists, but what we've been seeing. So, and it's
Right.
good to see you personally, kind of running the gun club and being something that a lot of people, I guess, don't really see. I've not seen a lot of female gun club presidents. I don't know why, but I think you're the first one I've kind of run across. What's that like? Is that weird or how is that?
So I found out about NAAGA through my mother. And my mother's a local judge here in Louisiana, and she was very security conscious and raised me in a way that I always I knew how to protect myself, knew how to assert myself in situations. And she told me about this gun club. She mentioned I didn't even own a firearm at the time, and she said, you should get your concealed carry. This is important. You move back home, and this might be something that you're interested in. And because my mom knew about my leadership skills and my tendencies to take initiative, I think she was planting that seed for me to go out and do some more research. And I didn't see a local chapter in Baton Rouge, and actually had a couple of other comrades that floated the idea on social media. And we got together and we all sort of founded this group as a collective. But um, I'm always one to step up. And when things needed to be filed and the mission statement needed to be drafted, or the bylaws and other administrative aspects needed to be handled, 501c3s and things like that, we stepped up, and I stepped up to handle that. And I think it just speaks to who I am as a person, not necessarily my deep history with guns, but I take on any challenge, and that didn't intimidate me. And my love for Baton Rouge also
Yeah,
inspired that, because there was a void, and our city has a particularly, in the state in general, has a particularly complicated relationship with firearms. And
yeah,
so, to the extent that I could help be a beacon of change and a beacon of light for that, I wanted to step into that void, and also elevate firearms as a civil rights issue, and refocus folks back on, this is a Second Amendment issue. This is not, let's not forget that this is a civil right.
right. No, it absolutely is, and I think if more people viewed it as that, it may. Well, I could almost guarantee that it would change the narrative per se on how it's viewed, especially in communities where maybe this is not the same for you, just because your mom and yourself were always defensive minded and she encouraged you to get involved, and that's different because most of the people who have come on the show who have talked about their moms, it's always been like, yeah, they weren't into it, or their parents never allowed firearms anywhere near the home, no weapons, no guns. It's almost like an overcorrection. Like if we have
Mm-hmm.
these things, we'll be viewed as dangerous, and we don't want to cause no trouble. And
Yeah.
to me, it's like a super regressive mindset to have. But I'm not angry at the people for having the mindset. I feel bad because I'm like, dang, like, so what happens if and when? Because for many people, it's when somebody comes and kicks in your door, and it's not somebody who's supposed to kick in your door. It's not. They don't have a warrant for you. Like, this is a situation where people are coming to hurt you and your family, and it's your duty to fight back. What you gonna fight
Right.
back with? Them
Your
boys
cell
got
phone
switches. What you
calling
got?
911.
Right. Like
Yes.
you can call 911. You can start recording like so many people do in this era, or you can say like, okay, it's time to protect my family. Let's enact the plan. You guys go there, and I will do what I can to protect you. And there's not a lot of ways to fight back other than the firearm, because that's the tool of choice for many criminals. So
Right.
if you don't
Yeah.
have an equal amount of force, then you're at an extreme disadvantage. So, sorry, I know I've been talking for a little bit, and I want to hear more from you. Um, what was that? What was that like in regards to becoming or getting yourself to a point where you're like, okay, I'm confident in my skills so much that I can teach, I can do different things, I don't have the imposter syndrome that so many of us have, not just in the guns community, but also if you're like myself and you're doing a podcast, like no matter how well you do, you always feel a little bit like maybe I shouldn't be here. How did you, I guess, have you overcome that? Are you still kind of in that season or like what have you done to kind
Yeah.
of get yourself ready?
So I was fortunate that I had an instructor take me under his wing when I first started in my firearms journey. And that tutelage gave me so much confidence in my ability to do what everyone else was doing, do what all the guys were doing, especially as it concerns handguns, and being able to manipulate the tool in such a way that it doesn't require a lot of strength. It's not a 16-inch rifle. And so basically, his philosophy was, become one with the gun. And that gave me the confidence to uh, get the mind over matter. Yes, it's scary at first, especially for women, especially for new shooters, especially for folks that don't have a lot of experience. And maybe I'm wired a little differently in terms of taking on challenges, but um, the ability to find something I was good at, I picked up a gun and I was naturally inclined, um, and I developed those skills. I was in the range twice a month, every month for 2 years straight, and I took every class that range offered, and I started traveling out to Texas and training with others. And that experience and exposure showed me I can do everything that the guys can do. And so I consider myself an average shooter, but in terms of being an instructor, I think I'm a great instructor because I know how to deliver the information in a way that my students can um, grasp it in an environment that makes it more comfortable for them, in a context that makes it real. Whereas when I took the concealed carry class, my instructor had a different point of view than I necessarily impart to my students as a Black instructor in the South, concerned about the safety of those that go out and wield that firearm to make sure that they do it justly. So um, I think I've gotten over a little bit of that imposter syndrome. I train. That's how I get over it. And things that I can't do, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with setting goals for myself and learning. And I surround myself with a good team. Um, I surround my. We run our organization by committee and by board. So yes, I'm a natural leader, but I'm not the best shooter in the club, and I don't have to be because I have folks around me that can lend their expertise.
That is actually really cool to hear, and to hear that you understand that piece, because that actually would challenge a lot of people in a way that they would not be able to overcome, not necessarily to having that insecurity within themselves, be like, okay, I'm not the best shooter, and to be the president of this gun club, shouldn't you be like a top shooter? Shouldn't you be able to like really like run and gun and perform like Trey Barber? I know you know Trey, and
Mm-hmm.
all these guys, and maybe you're just as good as Trey, but to the feeling like, okay, I have so much catching up to do, and to know like, okay, even though I could be better or I could be further along, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to get out there and train. I'm going to go seek additional help. I'm not just going to, just go to the range by myself and think that that's good enough for this position. I think that's awesome. And I did
Yeah.
see that you went out and you actually trained with down in Houston with my guy Randy and Phase Two and
Ooh, that was amazing.
that group. Yeah, that's actually a big reason why I was like, "Who is this girl? Okay, let's get her on the show." Because my guy Scout, Scout, he was like,
Let
"Yo,
me
you should
correct.
get her on."
I'm an above average shooter, but
Well, I mean, you got to be if you're
No,
going to be out
there's
there with
always,
those guys. You can't be
yeah,
bum.
no, that'll humble you real quick,
Yeah, you can't be a
for
bum.
sure.
And I do want to just take a quick second and say thank you to everyone who's tuning in live. I saw a few more people jump in. Go ahead and drop some questions for her. Type Q and colon, and we'll actually go ahead and either save those or ask them as we go, just depending on how many people hop in. And thank you so much for tuning in live. We appreciate it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. So I do want to go a little bit and just ask you, what are some of the challenges that you've kind of run into as the president of a gun club? Like, what are some things that you're just like, you know what, either I didn't see this coming, or like I'm sick of this. Like, if I have to deal with this
Yeah.
one more time.
So I guess start with the positives, and I know you didn't necessarily ask this, but uh, I'm grateful that we have a range that supports us. There's institutions that allow us to use the space and have been super supportive of me and the club to allow us to grow. And the challenges are it's a long run. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I think when we started, it was on the height of a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests and the Mike Brown incidents and other racial injustices. And so there was a lot of interest in firearms and self defense that we were able to ride that wave. And there was a large jump in interest in membership during that time, and folks just wanting to be prepared, realizing how unprepared they really were, and COVID and shutdowns and ammo shortages and everything else. And so that was a boon for us. But then things went back to normal. And so that interest waned. And I'm very fortunate that we had a close group of folks that were either previous enthusiasts or took a liking to what we were doing and wanted to support and have continued to support. But I put a lot of money out of my own pocket to make things happen and events happen. Um, it takes manpower, especially if you're going to be a black gun group and you're trying to dispel a lot of the myths about black gun ownership and help the community and actually not be paternalistic and think that you know better than folks, but meet them where they are. If it's child access issues, if it's helping folks get their records expunged, if it's helping them clear their records so that they can actually have their rights restored. One of our president, our vice president, he um, has had his rights restored. And so I think it's important, state director now. And so I think that's important to show that that's possible and that we can change that narrative. And so just the long running nature of this. And, I thought, okay, we'll get it running. It'll, it'll be self-sustaining, and then I can step back and go to law school. But, no, you still gotta send the emails. You still gotta manage the accounts. You still gotta show up to range days and bring the snacks and build it little by little.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because people, specifically the resources piece, you mentioned that you put a lot of your own dollars into this, and probably to a point where it doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense sometimes, especially if there's this greater mission. And that's kind of where I am, where I'm like, people don't really get it because they're like, oh, this is a pretty podcast, but they don't really understand that even though a lot of the things are set, there's a lot of like little expenses, little things that you have to get. I mean, I know for yourself, if you're like, okay, we want to get some training guns, we want to get some SIRT pistols, we want to get blue guns, we want to get,
Mm-hmm.
some a gun for people who maybe they come to the range and they don't have a gun. We want to get a 22. That's good for them, or something like that. I mean, whatever your goals are for really pushing this thing forward, people don't get that there's a lot of money that's coming out, and maybe they might even start complaining. Oh, why is there a fee? And why, I noticed it only costs this much to go to the range, but y'all charging a little extra. And it's like, okay,
Counting those
like
pennies, man.
I was like, well, and I get it because I'm kind of cheap myself, but if they understood the amount of sacrifice that you've already previously invested, not to make money, because I don't think you're in this thing to make a bunch of money. If you were, you're maybe not as smart as you look, but because you really think it makes a difference, that's why you're here. I mean, clearly, you're smart enough to go to law school. You're smart enough to know that this is kind of a money hole, money sink. Um, but I would encourage, if you are in Baton Rouge or Louisiana and you want to drive, you want to go support. Maybe give a love offering or whatever people call it.
Right.
And just make sure you're pushing this conversation
Yes.
forward.
Yeah, we've had members donate patches. We had a very generous member, one of our board members, donate patches that we've been able to sell as fundraising items. Uh, the food at some of our events, the targets that we can provide to members to shoot on. So every little bit helps. And uh, I take the philosophy in the same way that I do any other community movement building is that if we all bring a brick, I'll credit Karen Hunter. If we all bring our brick, then we can build something.
Hmm, that's awesome. I love it. I love it. Let's make it happen. Now, I want to talk about the bail project, but you mentioned the community projects. So I'm like, what kind of are community events? What kind of community events do you guys do?
Yeah, so we have done a couple, mostly just outreach to teach and let folks know that we're here. And we are planning a gun lock sort of drop off event, canvassing, neighborhood canvassing event, setting up stations, actually going door to door, talking with folks, explaining how gun locks work if they, are curious to learn and want one. So we take a pretty hands-on approach. There, the last event we were at, it was at a community theater. We just set up a table. We had gun locks available. We had information about the gun club. We were talking about tourniquets. That's another interesting and oddly or unfortunately sad reality in Baton Rouge and Louisiana is that folks get shot a lot,
Mm,
and knowing how to use a tourniquet might save somebody's life in those situations. And so I literally had some young men come up to me and I was showing them how to use a tourniquet, and they were like, damn, this could have really helped my homie so and so. And so it's sad that we got to teach trauma medicine
hmm.
to our community, but if that's what it takes to save lives, then we're gonna be out there with tourniquets trying to save lives.
Dang right. Wow, that's deep and powerful. To kind of move me a little bit. No, but it's the reality. But even beyond the reality that people are out here getting hurt in serious ways due to gun violence or violence that happens to have guns, depending on your philosophy on that term. Some people are funny about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, the understanding that traumatic injuries happen often, more often than one would expect, more often than even violence that occurs with guns. Would you believe it?
Mm-hmm.
I know a guy who's used a tourniquet 4 times in his life, and that's a lot. First of all, like you got some
That's a
bad
lot.
you got some bad luck following you, bro. Like what's going on? Like I don't even believe
That
in
is,
luck, but like that's not good. That's some stuff. Like figure that out. What you doing? But
what are you doing?
he worked in a warehouse, so uh, accidents may be a little bit more likely to happen if you're moving big machinery around and things are coming off shelves and doing things like that. So that's understanding those things. One of my favorite creators, Des, also known as Nina De La Flores on Instagram. She was actually in a car accident around this time last year, probably maybe 15 months ago at this point. And if it had gone any other way, she would have been in some serious trouble. Like she's got some serious scars. If you take a look, I believe on her arm and maybe something on her leg,
Yeah.
and her medical was in her trunk at the time. Not going to help you there,
Mhm.
but I mean, even if she had like a TQ like in her glove box or armrest or something like that, I'm not saying carry it on an ankle holster, but try to keep it close by so that if something crazy happens to somebody or yourself, you can actually apply said TQ or tourniquet readily. And for those who want to know, you can buy a tourniquet at obsidiantraininggroup.com. Code Armed Atlas gets you free shipping.
I got my med kit from Obsidian
Yes.
Training.
I mean,
So
listen, Randy, Obsidian
shout that
Training
shout
Group,
out the
they're
plug.
fantastic. Really awesome company because it's focused on providing only the best products to the people. And I love everything they're all about. So definitely check them out. And I know I said a lot, but I do want to make sure we hit Randolph's question. I know normally we like to save the questions for the end, but this one's actually really good. Would you share what it's like when a person shows up to an event? Like, what should they expect to experience?
Yeah, so we're a family. We especially a Southern family, so we lead with food. That's always our draw. But our general body meetings that we have as a gun club, those are once a quarter, and our goal is to just educate folks on the history of the National African American Gun Association, to educate them on the history of the PBS Pinchback Gun Club, to let folks know why we started this organization so they get a sense of what we are and what we aren't. We aren't an on call armed militia. We're about safety, we're about the sportsmanship, we are about political aspects that infringe upon Second Amendment rights, and especially as those intersect with, the racial aspect. But we are not trying to fill that gap. I think there's other ways in which folks who want to do that can do that. But letting folks know what we are and what we aren't. They're gonna get some good food. They're gonna get some good laughs. All of our members, we do a very good job of keeping the culture and not letting things get too. Um, I think folks can assume that it's going to be this highly charged, masculine, aggressive, intimidating space, but it's not that at all. We want to let all experience levels feel comfortable. And so one of our last general body meetings was just an AR educational course where we broke down all the parts, the history, misconceptions, the cleaning, all of those kind of things. And so it was real basic, real intro, but this was a concern because folks kept throwing around assault rifle, and so we really just dispel that and get rid of that miseducation. And so you're gonna find family after we do the classroom portion of our general body meetings. Then we always try to put rounds downrange, and so we'll do some kind of competition. We'll work with new members who maybe aren't comfortable shooting on their own. We will help. We got kids that come to the general body meetings, and so folks bring their kids, and so we're working with the little ones, and so it's a really positive experience.
Now, I was actually surprised when you said you work with kids because that's some people feel good about that. Some people don't. Like, how young would you say are the younger littles that come through? For those who call them littles,
Yeah, we've had some little kids, maybe 8, and
okay,
they
not
didn't
too
really.
young.
Yeah, so if they're not into it, then they're more than welcome to watch. Some of our older kids, 11 and 12, start getting more into it. Or even if they're younger, they're always welcome to come to the range and watch. As long as they're supervised. So folks bring their spouses, and their spouses may not shoot, but the kids are around, and so that's a part of the enculturation. And I think even if your child is not mature enough, that's a way to sort of gauge their maturity. Are they interested? Can they sort of understand what's going on? But we've had, you know, 10, 12 year olds that are mature enough and there's no problem.
Yeah. Now, I would say a thought came to mind that there are some shooting events, and this is kind of the worst, or not the worst, but the more difficult side of 2A culture when it comes to Black Americans getting involved. Is we have awesome events like yours that safety is key. We make sure that there's the right education. We make sure there's enough RSOs to go around. We make sure the family's getting involved in it. It's a safe environment for kids to be in. Because if not, like that's a lawsuit. That's a criminal charges. Like we have to be on top of it. And then there are other events where a lot of that is questionable, and I'm not, you know, generally too hard on certain people just because I'm like, I think firearms in the culture is a good thing for the most part. But we have a lot of groups that even come out of Louisiana, where you're from, who's like, dang, like every time they put on a shooting event, things look a little sus. Like, where's the firing line?
Right. Yeah.
Is that
We
is
use it
that a
indoor mostly,
huh?
so safety is usually never a concern in terms of folks beyond the line of fire or unsupervised
Right.
or anything like that.
You know,
I
pointing
can
guns in
see that,
dangerous
especially if it
directions.
turns into like a picnic kind of thing, and the lines get blurred. So, um, yeah, no, we don't really have that concern. We're always hyper vigilant, not only about how we're watching everybody else and making sure that we represent the club well, because we don't want to come into a space and then they're like, yeah, these are the folks that shoot the ceiling and don't and our range is pretty liberal. We can practice from draw, we can rapid fire, we can do a lot of interesting things. And so we want to embed that trust that we value safety, we're trained, we're professionals, we take this really seriously. Even if there are kids involved, it's it's age appropriate involvement. um, you know Not necessarily saying they all have to shoot 22s, but it's going to be age appropriate. And if they're not able to follow directions, then they shouldn't be in the space.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you really offering some information there and really kind of like setting the template on these things. Um, how would you say? And this is actually another question from the audience. Speaking of kids, how do you introduce children to firearms? I suppose that's a good question.
Yeah, so I can only speak from secondary experience and what my members tell me.
Sure. I mean, if you have that information.
Yeah, usually what I hear is they parents want to be the first folks to introduce their children. I've had cousins come to me saying, "Okay, my daughter's about to turn 13. She's asked about, because kids, they see it's not like this is going to be the first time that they've ever seen a firearm." And so the range that I train at, they have a children's safety class, and they do the whole Eddie Eagle bit, and that seems to go over well. I've overheard some of those classes and seen them from afar, and the children are really engaged. And mind you, these are white kids, and they are super comfortable, and they're singing the songs, and they know to stop and don't touch and tell an adult. And they're really excited about using the SIRT pistols. And so they start with a training gun, a laser, a SIRT pistol, and then bring them, allow them to use a 22. And if they're able to handle that, then they start to build up their confidence going forward. So I think it's about taking it in stages, making sure that they're able to grasp the safety concepts first, and dispelling that curiosity, because some kids might shoot a firearm and then realize they never want to touch one again because it's just an alarming experience. And so
Yeah.
that's fine. But now you've dispelled that curiosity and now they will never want to touch it. And so I think it really depends on their maturity level.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we've spoken in length about the gun club stuff, and
Yeah.
I'd be happy if you guys in the audience have additional questions later on, maybe towards the end of the conversation as we're wrapping. If you just or even now fire some of these additional questions in that you have about the gun club, and we'll tackle them at the end of the conversation if you have more questions. That said, let's hop over to this legal world. Legally curled over here. I see you. Like, get it?
Mhm.
This is awesome. Um, so right now you're in law school. Before law school, from my understanding, maybe you can help correct my timeline. You were a part of a organization called the Bail Project, and
Mhm.
I'm guessing one thing kind of led to the other. Like in my mind, that just makes sense. It just makes sense. That said, what was your time in the Bail Project like? What were you doing? And I might press you on that a little bit because I did a little bit of research and I've seen some people's feedback on organizations that um, go against the cash bail system and their thoughts. So I'd like you to, um, I guess, speak about your time there, and I'll have some additional questions.
For sure. So, yeah, I started my career in finance and investment banking and did that whole bit and just was really not satisfied and saw firsthand how I was fodder to the machine. And so I left that world and tried to reinvent myself, refocus myself, repurpose myself, and found out about the Bail Project through another organization called Data for Black Lives. And so I was really intentional about I want to use my gifts, my talents, my skills, my life force to better my local community and hopefully the global community. And so I moved back home. I started with the Bail Project. The Bail Project is a national nonprofit that operates a revolving bail fund. Community and local bail funds are nothing new. Um, Mutual aid movements have been around for a very long time and have assisted political prisoners and others, either justly or unjustly incarcerated, obtain bail and pretrial freedom. So the concept of taking that bail fund and systematizing it so that it can operate at a national level is what the Bail Project does, as they also combat the systemic causes of litigating and or abolishing cash bail, litigating against cash bail or abolishing it through the legislative system. And so that time showed me that you have to be able to balance multiple priorities. And I think it can be transposed into any other community struggle or political struggle uh, that oppressed people face. You have to address the immediacies of a condition. So in this case, the immediacy that somebody is in jail and they may lose their job, they may not be able to have access to their children. They may lose their home or their living situation just from 48 or 72 hours of being incarcerated. So the immediacy of getting someone out on pretrial bail is important, but then also questioning, does pretrial detention do what we think it does? And does it serve a purpose? And is it benefiting the society in such a way that it outweighs the costs and the human costs of keeping people locked up before they are convicted of a crime? So that's the long term work. That's the work you're seeing in Illinois, which has led to the first state to abolish cash bail after the New York experiment. So it showed me that you have to balance those two things at the same time. You have to run the short game and you have to run the long game. And I can see people's concerns with the philanthropic industry and the philanthropic industrial complex. I can see people's concerns with fear because there's a lot of fear mongering when it comes to bail reform, where folks think that you just let everybody go free and it's chaos, and that's not the case. Especially with the bail project model and the client support model. Ultimately, clients are better off when they're supported outside of a jail cell. So, how we get to a place in which we can support the most people possible is a question of resources and a question of municipal priorities. And so, if we will prioritize recovery and mental health and stable housing, then we could probably not have so many people incarcerated. And so it's a trade-off.
No, that's is such great points that you bring up. I especially am my wheels are spinning, and I'm like, you know what, this is it's interesting because I think for so long we've relied on the state to handle people that are considered detestable or bad or criminal quotes, because oftentimes people can get arrested and spend time in jail for things that they actually haven't done. So how terrible is that? You never get that time back, and you never get the loss back, especially considering the average American, and this is a quotable statistic, the average American cannot afford a $500 emergency. So what happens if you make $100 a day? I've been there, and you are in jail for 5 days. You're done. That's it. You are homeless, and I don't want to make light of that situation. To be um, in a situation where you're fighting for your life and you're like really trying to make it, and then somebody comes and shows up, and agents of the state kick in your door, and then that's it. Like for what? I don't know. I saw a little expose of the Bell Project and this lady who was driving without a license, which you need a license to drive. Yes, I understand. Um, that's just the rules of the road. But was driving without a license. You'd think that's like a ticket thing or something like that, maybe. But in addition to that, somebody had some meth in the car. It wasn't her car, but somebody had meth in the car. Was it her? Was it the other guy? We don't know. I mean, possession of drugs, the war on drugs, that's another question. That's another a social issue that we're tackling. So many people are becoming more okay with the idea of certain substances just not being criminalized per se. But there is also the issue of the thoughts of is the bail project creating a more dangerous situation by getting these dangerous criminals on the street? What are the criteria that you guys look at?
Yeah. So, not a current employee, so I cannot, be a spokesperson for the organization now.
Yes, I
But
understand.
I still
What were
believe in
some
the
of them?
mission. I still believe in what they do and stand for. I do think that it serves, ultimately, it is the righteous cause. It is the right thing to do. But in terms of the support model and how things were done, there was an intake process. There is a background screening. There are certain guidelines in which bail disruptors follow in terms of previous charges and people becoming disqualified because of a pattern of charges, especially as it concerns domestic violence. So, yes, there's always that consideration. However, if a judge sets a bond, that judge has deemed that person eligible for release. So it's never a matter of should this person be released or not. The judge, by setting a bond, has said that person is eligible for release. Now, whether they can pay that money is a different question. And so, bail does not make us safer in terms of rich white murderers that are able to pay a bond and are now back on the street versus someone who has been arrested for a substance related charge, or any other municipal offense, which in everyday life you would say this should not be arrestable, an arrestable offense. That's where the disparities come in, and that's where the human cost comes in. So I always want to point out that the system has said that this person is not a threat or a danger because they've set a monetary value that that person can be released.
That is such an interesting, I guess, concept. I mean, the concept of bail is so interesting, anyways. It's like, okay, yeah, you are accused of assaulting this woman. You are accused of evading police or different things. And the idea, I suppose, like the pie in the sky steel man idea is like, hey, if we at least hold something that you consider valuable, your money, you'll at least be likely to come back and then face your
Mm-hmm.
trial. Try not to do anything stupid now between now and then. And so it is some sort of an incentive system to kind of do right and be here for when we ask you to be here. Even though in the world of trials, your right to a speedy trial. I wish they would have written that out somewhere because a speedy trial can be a year from now. Like, come on, like,
Yeah, no, and that is speedy, especially if we talk about any sort of
right?
uh, side offense. Yeah,
No, but
yeah. The bail is to ensure that you return to court, and that there are other ways to do that. Right, the juvenile system here in Louisiana, a parent can put up 10% of that bail, and the state will hold it. And then after the case is completed, they get the 10% back. So I don't see why that model couldn't be applied to the adult carceral system if we are genuinely concerned about folks coming back, and we don't want to pillage already um, overtaxed, impoverished, making it on. I think the median income in my 70802 zip code is $26,000 or something like that. So these folks can't afford a $10,000 bail or even $1,000 bail, because that means you have to have 12% liquid now. So it's a sham. And if we were truly concerned about reducing crime, we would provide people with the services that they need.
yeah, and you look at court fees, and court fees are ridiculous. I had a parking ticket. No, it was a speeding ticket, just because I had an Altima, and if you have an Altima, you're gonna get a speeding ticket. Stereotypes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's interesting that yeah. So there's the bail system where you have to give the court money, and I think I've heard that they can even keep a certain amount of the money after you've kind of come back, even if you, I
But they
guess, even if you
cut
beat the case.
off every bond.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you pay a speeding ticket, there's a ticket, and then there's the court fees. Why not just have one flat fee? I mean, I don't know. People, they
I
gotta have a
love
little
this.
line item, let you know.
Start to question the user pay system and who it ultimately impacts.
I don't know. The world spins because of money. It seems,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really just interesting to see how, especially now that we have like these global conflicts happening, and there's a lot of money moving back and forth. It's like where does money even come from? Like, what's the point? If you could just print more, just give yourself more. I don't
Right.
know. I'm tripping
Well, it's
because
because we no longer have the fiat to back it up. But it's that speaks to the history of bond, right? Bond was a pledge of land that only landowners could make, or if you had someone a surety to vouch for you, then you would be eligible for bond.
mm,
And so it is a carryover of that system of, okay, well, since not everybody has a title or a deed to a house, and that's a whole other economic situation, we
right,
will extract wealth through the bond system, because it's an insurance contract.
sure, yeah,
And so, yeah,
yeah. So I suppose we've already dealt with the concept that we're letting these violent um, um, humans are back on the street. How dare you? I've seen the comments. I looked at I looked through the comments just to see what people are saying. People who are passionate enough to leave a comment, what are they saying? They're like, you guys are the cause. When I say you guys, the former company that you used to work for,
Yes.
organization, um, are the cause of crime rising. And I'm like, probably not. But I have spoken on this show to domestic violence victims and people who have gone through stuff. I have family members who have been robbed at weapon point, and the question is like, okay, so this person who has been stalking you, this person who has been this and this and that, the judge is created. The judge has kind of put them in a situation where, by happenstance of them having no money and no assets, they will be away from this person. The girl who's running from this crazy abuser, um, they will have some relief. But now the org has stepped in. And obviously, like you said, if there's like a history, then you guys won't get involved. It's like, okay, this person is a problem. They're a menace to society. This is a poor use of donor funds. But some abusers, it's their first time.
Sure.
And they don't need a second time before it's a murder
That's
charge.
the point. Crime is unpredictable.
Yeah.
So I'll give you the organizational answer. It's either we support that folks are innocent until proven guilty, or they're not.
Yeah.
And so we start to make a distinction between violent and nonviolent crimes. And as a victim of domestic violence and survivor of domestic violence, I get it. It's different. And Louisiana has a particularly heinous and troublesome problem with domestic violence, and there's a whole bunch of cultural aspects there. But um, I get it. I get it. It's alarming for a victim to think that the judge let him out, or this bail project folks bailed him out. I would have folks that called me and their son or daughter or whomever was charged second-degree murder, first-degree murder. Granted, we didn't do cases like that, but crying for us to bail these folks out. And I can't say that one, that person did it. Baton Rouge only has a 50% homicide closure rate. And so I don't even know if the police did a good job in identifying the particular suspect, but um, there's somebody that wants that person out.
Yeah.
And that's somebody's son and that's somebody's daughter. And they're assuring me that, and especially Louisiana laws and the accessory laws, in which somebody can quickly be wrapped up into a situation that looks like first degree murder, but they really just drove the car, or they sent a text message, or they did this or did
Yeah.
that.
You get caught up real quick.
And so they're not a murderer, but they do fall victim to the pretty draconian system that we have here. So
Yeah. The prison industrial complex and all the
yeah, so
attaching.
so I get it, but the data does not support that bail reform increases crime. The data does not support that um, bail fund organizations disproportionately affect recidivism rates, or if anything, 93% of our clients showed up to court, had their cases resolved one way or another. 43% of our clients in Baton Rouge had their cases dismissed. And so that tells me that the case was never valid to be prosecuted to begin with.
Yeah.
And so we're just holding all elements of the system accountable. If we're going to keep dangerous people in jail, let's keep dangerous people in jail. But let's not overextend ourselves trying to throw the book at the addict who needs rehab.
Right.
Um,
And I suppose that's a better
Meanwhile,
question. Is how do you
there are
you
real
know
gun, issues, or violence issues that could be solved.
yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And I think that that does, I guess, beg the questions like, okay, what do we want to, like, how much tax dollars are we putting into keeping an addict in a state-run prison or a private-run facility or something? And I don't know the exact pathway to actually end up in like a facility
Yeah.
that's like long term, the big boy stuff.
Yeah. Jail
But
versus prison.
pardon.
I said just jail versus prison.
Right, right. So I mean, ending up in jail, like, how much money are we spending keeping this person in jail for them to come out and kind of have the same problems when they need like a serious form of rehab, when they need community support, when they need, some of the shame that comes with getting taken in, but also they need some of the support and community, I guess, togetherness that comes with, like, hey, now certain family members know. Now there's a system. Now there's maybe organizations that are paid for not by the state and by tax dollars, but by people who are concerned and want to give towards, uh, um, such as the Bill Project, where it's like, okay, it's not just tax dollars being used for one more project. It's the people deciding where they want to put their hard-earned money. So that's cool, and I appreciate you kind of clarifying that. I suppose my only question would be is like, okay, so you guys have been fighting for this thing, and I know we've talked about, like, okay, certain offenses, they are, they are what they are, and you are your own first responder, anyways. So
Mm-hmm.
get a gun and learn how to use
Yeah.
it. And if somebody is threatening your life, well, do what you got to do. I'm not here to tell you exactly what that is, but use
Mm-hmm.
discretion, because then you might end up in their position. So be smart.
Yeah.
That said, we have Chicago, who recently had some reform, it seems, and people are saying it's the purge, which, that is maybe an alarmist statement, maybe a little reactionary in a sense, but you wonder, it's like, okay, you look down the list of offenses that are not, like, if the police catch you, they're not even gonna respond in a normal way, um,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, a lot of these offenses are pretty intense. Like, if you are suspected of, and I wish I had it in front of me. I
Good
did,
list. Yeah.
yeah, but it's like some of them, and somebody can look this up. Some of them are pretty pretty wild.
Yeah, I think you also have to, and also being the law school student, I'm gonna pull that card. Sometimes you got to actually look at the charge, because something might say assault, and folks automatically assume that, like, this person brutally injured somebody else because they're charged with assault. Assault means reasonable apprehension of harm. And
Right.
so, these are assault in the first degree, assault in the second degree, and now you have this picture in your head that somebody was really violent, and that may or may not be the case. And so, you got to know what these charges actually are and what they mean. Certain batteries offenses have different degrees and different levels. So if I push you, yes, that's a battery. But does that mean that I need to be incarcerated? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, this is the idea of, like, you get into a little dust up, um, with somebody on the job site, and because the right
Mm-hmm.
person saw, now cops are called, and now you're literally sitting in a cell, can't feed your family, your whole
Right.
family is
I
completely
think the
embarrassed.
human cost is just far too great
You've been
in
using that word
pretrial.
a lot. Is that your word or their word?
I don't know. I'm forgetting sort of what we the buzzword that we use, but the research around the billions of dollars in the economic impact of having folks incarcerated pre-trial, the loss of work, impact on the family, lost housing, lost wages, things like that. So um, I call it a human cost because we ultimately have to realize that we're dealing with human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one, they aren't as predictable as folks may want to think. And two, we can't treat folks like animals and expect them to behave and to be supported and to be adapted to the world in a way in which we'd like if this is how we're treating folks.
No, you're correct in many ways, and I'm curious to, I suppose, learn more about this program. Maybe somebody can come on who's completely against the program and kind of make their case for
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
Um, that would be interesting. Maybe it'd be interesting to have an entire panel of folks that are just sharing their thoughts on what criminal reform looks like, what bail reform looks like, and kind of understanding these things. I think this is one of the costly conversations that we ought to have. And I hate to bring race into everything, but clearly, as Black Americans have made up 50% of the prison system. Um, God forbid we talk about how much of the jail system, because jail and prison is
Right.
slightly different, and where some of these crimes are occurring, where people are let off and then bail and then lawyers and public attorneys, and we could go on forever. But
Yeah.
I do understand that this is a conversation that not just we have to have, but we have to have because it's impacting people like that and
Right.
if you don't know them, somebody does. Like this is all of us in a sense. And I know some people don't like to speak in oh, what's the term, the we, because we are all individuals and we have to make our own decisions. But if you care about your neighbor, if you love thy neighbor, we should be concerned about how justice is occurring and how injustice is taking advantage of things in the name of
Mhm.
justice. And it sounded cooler in my head. I swear it did.
No, it came out just fine. No,
Thank you.
I agree. The collective consciousness is what is going to give us the empathy that we need to ultimately what we're doing is not effective. And
Right.
so even if you don't believe in like the heartsy argument and it doesn't move your heart that these are human beings and we got to treat them as such, if you wanted a safer neighborhood, then you would look at alternatives to pretrial detention. If you really want to feel safer in your communities, I can guarantee you that this carceral system is not going to give it to you.
Right. Now, I've known people. I actually knew one girl who, when she got sentenced, she was set on a work release.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a and maybe you don't know, is there a setup where you can be on like a house arrest work release and
I guess it doesn't. Those are probably two different things. So if someone has DOC time, then yes, they can be put on a work release, especially if they're close to being, if their sentence is close to being completed, and that's fairly common. Um, the house arrest is a separate pretrial detention mechanism, and so that's where the ankle monitors, or in this case, they have forget the name of the company that they're using now, but cellular tracking services in which you are released pre-trial, but you do have some monitoring conditions.
okay, and can those people still go to a job site or
Yeah, you would notify your supervision or supervisor office supervisor. These are the places that I will be at these times, and they will they will allow in their tracking you to be there.
mhm.
And if you are outside of that place at any given time, then the supervisor will be alerted, and you'll have to explain why.
I wonder if, and obviously restraining orders is that's not the justice system. That's just a request to a guy who wears a robe to please don't let him come near me. He's breathing my air. Although I trivialized it just now, even though they are extremely
But it's
necessary, but it's a
paper.
piece of paper, you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we had a recent incident in which a well-to-do guy out of St. Francisville had an ankle monitor, still went to the wife's house,
oh, jeez.
still killed her. The monitoring system went off late. Doesn't matter. He's already there. Um, yeah, it's a piece. Even if you have an ankle monitor on, so what?
Right. It is just another thing, and people who are determined to do harm will do harm.
Mm,
And the goodness in my heart wants to believe that, if people have a little accountability, maybe they'll do the right thing.
yeah, it's a
Some,
numbers thing, right?
right?
Because majority of folks may, but it still is doesn't eliminate the risk.
No, you are correct. Um, so Thank you for going down that trail with me. We want to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in live. I see you guys in the comments going back and forth and asking certain questions. I see Randy of Obsidian Training Group noted that he is learning a lot tonight. So thank you so much to our guest Ashley White for sharing your experiences. And I feel like there's so much more here, and we'd need another like two
Yeah,
three hours to get through it.
awesome conversation.
No, it's this is a dope CrossFit conversation. I'm happy with the way it's going. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about after the Bail Project, law school. I'm assuming that there's a story involved in here that involves like, hey, I saw so much in the Bail Project, and I saw how the legal system was killing us, and I said, I need to be involved. I need to be a catalyst for change. And it sounds like I'm making fun of you. I swear I'm not.
No, that's a common story.
So, is that anywhere near your story where you saw the problems and you wanted to be the part of the solution? Or is it completely different? Am I completely off?
No, for sure. So my career paths have uh, winded and led me down different directions. And so I did see the power of the license, right? When you're an attorney, it makes a difference. You can go see your client in the middle of the night. You can speak for them on their behalf. You can make decisions. You can be let in the room that you wouldn't necessarily be let in to have a voice. And so the license matters, the bar roll number matters. But in terms of, do I think that I'm going to like change the system from the inside out? No. I think that that change has to come from the political will of the people. But what I can do is be a agitator. I can be a catalyst in the sort of least tropey way possible, but in a very intentional way in which the unique intersection of my life experiences, my skills, my network, my passion can allow me to catalyze others and be an advocate for those others. And so, like I said, the license matters, but I think the intention behind it was always to use it as a lever in an overall my overall political and social movement towards how do I leave this place better than I found it. So for me, I think the law is a tool that, especially the American legal system, it's a it is a unique beast in that we give so much weight to law and order, but the realities of the situation and the realities of life, we cannot just rest our laurels in the law and expect order. And so it takes the actualization, it takes the people questioning, um, it takes these cases that challenge the status quo to make that reality of equal justice a reality. So I see it as a tool. Specifically, I see it as a tool to redistribute wealth. I think when folks don't want to hand over those reparations, that you find a way to mandate them to do so through the legal system. And there's been varied successes in sort of the legislative options of getting reparations and what that means. But I think there are ways through, unfortunately, wrongful death suits, unfortunately through civil rights suits, in which we sort of have been piecemealing um, that. But Jackson, Mississippi, Flint, Michigan, folks and communities that have suffered severe injustices and need someone to come in and mandate that the municipalities redistribute the wealth and fix the pipes or compensate victims for the lead in the water, or the Tylenol that has caused ADHD, or the um, hair perms that have caused uterine cancer. Like these are real suits now, and folks are really getting real money because of the rampant sort of disregard for people and human life. So I see it as a tool. I see it as a redistributive tool, and I hope that I can just do my little part.
Wow, thank you for sharing that and kind of getting people kind of up to speed on your why behind this I guess new chapter of your life, because I don't know if people can tell, but you're not a 20-year old heading
Not a
off to law
20-year
school. And as you had mentioned earlier, this is, and maybe you didn't say this part, but I think when you spoke, you mentioned this is your third iteration of self. And so I think that speaks to something where we say like, hey, listen, like just because you are 15 years into your career or however many years you are, it, when you say career, working life, it doesn't mean that you can't make a change that is kind of a lot. Like going from okay, I'm doing some um, social work or social justice
Mhm.
work or however you want to kind of frame it in a way that's respectful to you. And saying like, now I want to get involved in the legal system in a very real and tangible way, where the impact is like this is not a game anymore. This is the real deal. This is where the big boys come to play. People's lives are hanging in the balance in a way where, I suppose, if being involved in firearms, you already kind of have an idea, and but even still, the real world understanding of it, I think even more people understand, where they see the TV and they see the trials that are happening in real life, and they're like, wow, this person's life is about to get really messed up. I mean, you even see like cases like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, where you know they're throwing around numbers that is like basically play money at this point. Like, oh, yeah, I'm suing you for $20 million. Okay, like what does that even mean? But
Mhm.
many people know somebody who's gone to jail. Many people know somebody who feels like they need to or has filed an appeal or and this and that. Like by the time you're an adult, you've met somebody who's tangled with the legal system, and the fact
Mhm.
that you are saying like I want to get involved and do something that makes a difference in that way, I think that's pretty cool. And I wish there were more people who are willing to put in the hard work, because everybody knows law school's not easy. Like if it was easy, everybody would do it and lawyers wouldn't get paid anything. But you know, I suppose that's that. Do you feel like this was a good idea? Are you struggling, or like what's going on? Like be honest.
So far, so good. I can't. I'm waiting for grades to drop next week from the first
Saved by the
semester.
bell. I see you. I'm
So
messing.
we'll
Obviously, I think you're smart, and I have no doubt that you made A's and B's, if not A's. So
right. We'll confirm that. And you know, I am a type A, so of course I want to do the very best that I can, the top percentile that I can. And so it is a challenge in the sense that I am older, and I had to sort of get into the groove again of studying, but I worked in pretty intense industries, and so I'm no stranger to pulling all-nighters or staring at a screen until my eyes hurt. Like
right,
that's used to that. So in that sense, I'm fine and are well prepared for this. I'm also super confident in my abilities, in my purpose and destiny to be here and what I'm going to do. So that all helps being an older student, that I don't have to go through those self-conscious jitters. But I've got different bills than some of my peers.
right,
I've got interests. I got other things going on. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. I don't have a family, you know, no kids or anything. So I don't have that challenge. But it is a challenge when I'm thinking about as a working woman. I've just basically set myself back 3 years to say, okay, I can't really start a family in the middle of law school, right? So, there are other things that I'm sacrificing to do this,
Yeah.
but um, the challenge of law school is one I'm well suited for.
Yeah. I mean, forgive me if this is maybe an off limits topic, but I imagine that that makes it hard to, I guess, be in the dating scene if that's a scene you care for, where it's like, okay, yeah, so hey, what about you? What do you do? Oh, I'm a student. I do this and this, but I'm a law student. Oh, you're a what? Okay, well, what's your weekends like? Well, I'm just studying until 2 a.m. Oh, okay, mm,
Reading 8 hours straight.
right,
Yeah, if anything, it's actually a nice shield.
yeah.
Um, just to be like, nope, sorry, no time.
Well, I'm sure if somebody's really committed, they'd be like, you know what, I'll come study with you. Of course, all the thirsty dudes in the world. I've been
I
in college.
It's actually not helpful. Like, I don't. I actually don't want to study together. So,
Right.
that wouldn't work.
There you go. Well, I appreciate your candor there. Um, Now, was there anything else about law school that you just really wanted to share with folks, or did you want to hop over to the amateur boxing conversation?
Yeah, no, I think it's so I think the entering class this last 20 this year 2022, 7.8% of the entering class was black. So I just want to encourage anybody else that's considering it, that thinks they're maybe too old or whatever, too far gone. That's not the case. If anything, folks with real life experiences are much more comfortable in law school in terms of actual making the lessons and the cases seem more real.
Hmm.
It's as much of a commitment as you want it to be in terms of there's part-time programs and it may take you a little longer, but I think folks that if it's not law school, if it's some other program or some other thing, I'm big on do you and plan for it, and it can work.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I appreciate you sharing that. I was just thinking that I personally, I was pretty much a terrible student. I'm not type A. Like I'm type like negative B when it comes to schoolwork. Like I'm a great auditory listener, well, learner rather. So this is generally fun for me. But when it came to studying all night, like I was dating my wife at the time. It was just like I'd rather go hang out. You know, but she's like super type A, so that's is what it is. So I did want to bring up a point, and maybe you can let me know how many are all judges, were they previously lawyers?
Yeah, so to serve as a judge, well, I can only speak for Louisiana. To serve as a judge, you do have to at least been barred.
Hmm.
There's no like experience requirement, but you do have to have passed the bar.
Right. So I guess my question or concern, or maybe it's a statement, is for those who are concerned about representation in the legal system, especially when you look at places like Louisiana that has really strong pockets of like a black population per se. Why would you not want more black lawyers who would then become black judges if they did a good job, of course? Um, why would you not want that, and why would you not want to be? I'm not sure exactly how the judges are appointed where you are, but making sure that we kind of create a system where the representation is fair and at least understandable. Because I don't expect 100% of judges to be black. Like that doesn't seem reasonable. 100% of the world isn't black. Like 100% of the America's not. So I'm like, can we at least get the numbers where it kind of makes sense? Especially
Yeah.
because it's not like, oh, black people they don't like law school because nope, there's nothing that I've seen that says that. Like we got you,
Yeah.
we got a lot of people. We even have freaking Coleon Noir who is an actual attorney. So you and Coleon Noir
Oh,
have
okay.
something in common. Yeah, he's like an
That,
actual attorney, which is weird, because he's like a gun nut. um, reviewer
No, not
extraordinaire.
weird. Not weird at all. Yeah, so the judges in Louisiana are elected, or
Right.
at least at the state level. So I do agree. It should be representative. The bench should be representative of the constituency. So
That just makes sense to me.
yeah, my mom's a black judge. Many of her colleagues, especially call them the baby judges, this last election 2 years ago, um, they had an influx of new judges come in. Folks had retired, and many of them were black and elected by their constituents. And so I think, given the fact that 83% of the folks that come through the criminal justice system here in Baton Rouge are black, um, I would hope that that should serve as a barometer for why we need more folks that are at least sympathetic or understanding of what it means to be black in Baton Rouge and how that should, because judges can be impartial and still understand the realities of communities and inequities and um, why people are in the position that they're in. So, yes, yes, we need more black everythings in terms of collective consciousness around why representation. Uh, we need more consciously black representatives in these spaces, to be a. I mean, they're public servants.
Sorry for the thunder. It's the weather's, kind of sucking outside. So, my apologies if you're catching the thunder in the mic. That said, um, that is an interesting question. I did not realize that your mom was a judge. I think that is kind of. I'll put it like this. My dad, he owned a business. He owned a education for GEDs, and he, really helped a lot of people working in an oil refinery kind of be able to stay at that job and move up because they had a GED. A lot of people working at the refinery did not have education. So I think it's really sweet that your mom, having been a judge, kind of showed you what's possible in a sense. And maybe you would have found that because of who you are. Maybe you wouldn't have. But like for me, I have to credit at least a little bit that I'm doing this because I believe anything. I believe I can do whatever I want. Like
Mm-hmm.
because I saw my dad doing it. Like
For
he
sure.
wants to do this, he's going to try. He might not be successful, but he's going to try. He's going to put a lot
Yeah.
of effort into it. So, and maybe would you say that your mom kind of helped you to believe in this, or is this something that you wanted independently of her entirely?
Yeah. So, my mother definitely gave me my moral compass, and I'm thankful for that. But I guess we follow more after our parents more than we may consciously realize. My mom went to Howard. I went to Howard. Mom went to law school. I'm going to law school. Mom's a judge. I don't necessarily want to be a judge because I think that's more public scrutiny than I'm willing to endure right now. But I do think that I looked at her as a um, yeah, as an example, and chose to follow in some of her footsteps and chose to diverge from that consciously as well, because I think, unfortunately, as a child of the 60s, she was pigeonholed by some of those limitations of just being a post Jim Crow baby and growing up in the civil rights era, and maybe feeling that she had to fit a mold to be the model black person and break all the barriers and had to be extra perfect. In the same way that our parents say you have to work twice as hard, um, to do certain things and to get the same result. Whereas because of her sacrifices, because of her peers and others like, you know, her contemporaries who did break the mold in some ways, but they were left without an identity in a lot of ways. They were the first black this, but they never got to experience the freedom of not having that burden of being the first black to do certain things. So I had much more freedom in my career and in my life, and I'm thankful for her sacrifices that allowed me to do that. And at the end of the day, I think having a judge for a mother, you end up being a little bit more logical and argumentative, and you're used to that environment, and so it did prepare me to take on law school.
You know, I find it fascinating the, you know, the quote. Forgive me if I butcher it. If I've seen farther than others, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that you are propelled by the greatness of your parent. You have so much more potential because you already have everything that they've learned. They have the ability to impart to you all the mistakes that they've learned. They have the ability to kind of help you to avoid many of those and to sometimes slingshot you. There's a statistic that says like it's ridiculous. Like there's like a 70 percentage like nepotism rate when it comes to parents working in like these big firms and like six-figure jobs and then bringing their kids in to work at the firm and kind of
Mm-hmm.
slingshotting their career so that they don't have to work a 9 to 5 that's only paying them like $11 an hour or 9.50, which I've done that, been there, that guy. and
0 star. Do not recommend.
it this doesn't help. Like how are you supposed to save? Like how are you supposed to invest in your 401k and all these different things? And I'm not trying to say like, oh, raise the minimum wage. I'm not in that conversation right now, although it is a conversation to have.
Yeah,
But
I will raise the minimum wage.
I, I do
But
wonder how we haven't raised it in the amount of years that it, you know, like things have changed. But you know what? Work for people that pay you what you're worth. That's what I'm going to say right now. And if you don't have any other option, I understand. So the where were we? I
the
do need.
success of our parents, or
Yes, so we're able to go further because of our parents, and you see the situations, and a big reason why Black Americans, I guess, are angry at a lot of what the system is because so much of the progress that our parents could have made was blocked, where many of them couldn't buy homes in good areas. Many of them, you know, were and like don't even talk about like the Tulsa massacre and things like that, where all this wealth was built up and taken. So now you don't have those stepping stones, and so many people still do have that, and you see it, and you're like, wow, this is great. Like Shermichael um, Singleton from Guns Out TV, he worked in
mm,
D.C. You know, he was pretty much a politician. He was a political strategist. He worked for Trump's White House for a little bit, but back when he was a Republican, and now he has his own TV show on I think it's NBC or um, one of them. And like this man's a star. How did that happen? Well, if you know anything about his family, his grandfather was actually um, like a big deal, and I think his mom. And I don't want to put this out there if it's wrong, but I think his mom is like an executive at like Amazon or something like that. So like he didn't pull himself up by his bootstraps. Like if he had some bootstraps, there was some like nice bootstraps. Like I want those bootstraps.
we need to stop glorifying the struggle.
Now I mean it's cool if you can get it done, but like
Yeah,
don't do it if you don't have to. Like
yeah,
like excel to the point where you can give your children's children blessings. Like that's what I'm here for. So kind of going back to it because I know we kind of like went down this rabbit hole and
yeah,
we're kind of
yeah.
running short on time. I do want to ask about your thoughts on what are the biggest barriers. This is a question in the comments. Thank you for the question. Some of the biggest barriers that Black students specifically, and maybe other minority students have, but more specifically Black students have with getting into law school, or are there economic barriers? Is it like a social barrier? Is it mental? Is it even getting accepted? I mean, Howard,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I wish I had more data at my disposal. I'm big on data, but For me, I definitely had the privilege of being a second generation law school student. So any feelings of inadequacy, I think you can kind of start with the first barrier being self, right? And self doubt. And that gets a lot of students in terms of not feeling, because we hold law school up with medical school and all these other prestigious professional graduate programs as if it has to be impossible because um, it is a vetting process and they only want to select the cream of the crop and you have to be exceptional. No, you do have to be dedicated. You do have to be able to play the game, right? Some of the best advice that I've gotten so far is law school is not the time to be clever. You can be clever when you're an attorney, but right now they want to see, can you input the information and output it in a way that will pass the bar exam. So I think the first barrier is self and that imposter syndrome and the self doubt. Um, Once you get over that and realize that um, one, you don't, Harvard is not the only law school out there, and look at the programs that you want to be in and which schools specialize in those programs. I chose Loyola because of its social justice focus and the law clinic that they have, the poverty law clinic. So I had no intentions on going to Yale or Harvard or spinning my wheels around that because one, is just not a financially feasible option, but two, it wasn't going to give me what I needed, and it was going to indoctrinate me in a way that I wouldn't have wanted to be indoctrinated. So um, it's manageable. It's definitely achievable. It does. I mean, you got to be ready to read long passages and get through that. But a lot of it's a test preparation as well. There are going to be some changes coming to the LSAT in 2025, and a lot of schools will not require the LSAT going forward in 2025. So the ABA, American Bar Association, has set out to remove that requirement, and then schools can choose to still mandate it or not. And so if folks are anxious about test preparation, that may aid in that and as a tool to get more underrepresented students into law school. But we got to be able to compete. And so we don't want to just go into these programs like barely got in. It takes practice tests. It takes getting the feedback. It takes refining your personal statement in a way that is unique to you and sets apart your value system. So um, the biggest thing that I did was get a high score on the LSAT. So that allowed me to have more options when I was applying for school. Now, granted, I don't get the sort of test taking anxiety that some folks may get, but um, we're going to see a different law school class come in after 2025, and I think it'll be for the better as we devalue the LSAT and we look more into people's personal experiences. And so, if you feel like academically you need to supplement, then that should be, with your extracurriculars, with your community service, with your demonstrated interest in the legal field, and with the right program and the right mentors, because you're going to need your letter of recommendations, then I believe it's achievable for anybody that wants to.
That's awesome. Thank you for saying that. And I think if there's anybody listening who wants to be involved, that I feel like is should be some relief, and maybe you're a boring person who's never been involved, and maybe now you feel like, oh well, I can't lean on the power of my intellect and test taking abilities. Maybe that's a is that a concern for people?
I think part of the haze of law school is the test. Like you have this one final exam, you have this one bar exam. Um, I personally have not found it to be that unnerving. The most unnerving part is getting to the exam and all of the anxiety that comes before the exam. But you work your whole semester for that exam in the same way that you work 3 years to prepare for the bar. So it should never feel as though you didn't put in the work to be there, because you did. But if you feel like, because it is a forced ranking system, once you get into law school, that you don't compare, then that's where the supplements come in. That's where the mentors come in. That's where the study groups come in. And so, um, half the battle is getting there. Uh, Another half of the battle, and we're not going to make perfect fractions here, is staying there, believing in yourself, managing your budget, knowing how much loans you're gonna have to take out because it's gonna be unavoidable. But half of that, of the staying there is finding your style. And if you're not a great test taker, then the practice the practice tests are going to be the only thing that's going to really help you through that. Or I've seen the mental, sort of the mind coaching aspect of it. Some of it is a mental block in which you let the anxiety overwhelm your ability to perform. And so in the same way that professional athletes may have a mental coach to help them get through performance anxiety, or achieve a higher potential. I have seen and have had other um, attorneys recommend that to me if I need it, in terms of, yes, you know the information, but you are limiting yourself through the anxiety.
Wow. So, Ashley, we're at a point where it's like, it's after 10 on my side. I know you have other stuff you could be doing. Should we
Well, I'm
wrap
on
up?
break.
Oh,
We can
you're
talk all
on
night.
break, so I'm just gonna monopolize your
No, but
entire night.
I think we're at a good point.
Okay. Well, at that point, I do want to at some point get you back on here to talk about your boxing career as an amateur boxer. I think.
Yeah, I've been in hibernation. That's the thing about law school. You can't
Yeah.
focus on too many things at one time. So I
Okay.
haven't been in 5 months,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Can you give the folks a little teaser about maybe some of the stuff that we'll talk about when we finally do talk about that?
Sure, sure. I mean, it's true to brand, of course. I go for the most challenging of challenges. And so a couple years ago, I got the bright idea. Actually, a coach reached out to me because he saw one of my Instagram videos and said, "Have you ever considered boxing, amateur boxing?" And I was like, "No, but I would." Um, but actually, I lied. I had considered uh, mixed martial arts when I was living in Los Angeles, taking up Krav Maga. So, uh, 2.5 years ago, I signed up with USA Amateur Boxing, and it has been a super fulfilling venture, frontier, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for sharing all that. Thank you for sharing on the main topics. I suppose if anybody is hopping in at this point and they're like, "Oh, what were they talking about?" We talked about a lot. We talked about your journey into law school, but before that, we talked about your journey before that, where it was working for the Bail Project and just the social work involved in that, and really, I guess, kind of forming yourself to get to this point. And even before that, talking about how you are a president of the what's the name of the gun club? One more time.
Yes, Pinchback Gun Club.
The PBS Pinchback Gun Club. Sorry, so many gun clubs floating around in my head. I don't want to say it wrong, and it is a
I
long
understand.
name.
No,
So
no harm.
that said, I encourage you guys, if you are tapped in at this point, go ahead and rewind, check out the conversation. If you're on the podcast, thank you so much for tuning in to this point. And Ashley, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. Our gun club is PBS Pinchback GC, and that's the handle on Instagram. My personal handle is underscore Wild Magnolia. My firearms business is Asset Training Group. I do teach concealed carry in Louisiana. Asset being the Kemetic spelling of ISIS, the the guardian of kings and queens in Kemet. So there's so much imagery and metaphors that go with that, and the mission that I'm trying to drive with the Asset Training Group, and getting us tapped in to those Kemetic roots. So look me up, ASET Training Group.
Okay. And for everybody watching or listening, thank you so much for tuning in. Like I said earlier, if you are a fan of the show and you want to help out, make sure you're subscribed. And of course, for those of you who are on the podcast, hop over to the YouTube side and subscribe, because we do want to make sure that we hit 1,000 subscribers so we can kind of keep this thing moving in the right direction. Of course, if you're looking for gear or merch, we're trying out some new stuff. If you like this shirt that I'm wearing now, let me know in the comments. And of course, if you want to buy any of the previous merch, link down below. And am I missing anything? I don't know. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to Ashley for giving us her precious time. She's on break and she's gone above and beyond to make sure you guys are fully informed and just aware of what she's doing. I think it's just super cool. But thank you for tuning in. And until next time, keep it costly.